Hello and welcome to Personable, a podcast speaking to the world's best, enabling you to become the best that you can be. I'm your host, Harvey Bracken-Smith, and today I'm honored to be joined by Jenk OZ. In 2017, Jenk, as a young boy, founded iCoolKit, a business he built and generated tens of thousands of pounds in the same year, and he was once named as the UK's youngest CEO. In 2019, he transitioned this to THRED, which was a shifted focus on an older demographic of teens and young adults with an emphasis on social change and attracting a strong Gen Z base. In 2020, Jenk also launched THRED Media, a consultancy business that has now worked for the likes of Google and Snapchat. Jenk is highly skilled in a number of instruments and has attended many of the world's top musical and theatre schools, including the Juilliard School and the National Youth Musical Theatre. Jenk is also a DJ and an interviewer, having interviewed the likes of Rory Sutherland, Dr. Werner Vogels, and the founder of LastMinute.com, Brent Hoberman. Jenk is a keynote speaker with over 90 events, including 3 TED Talks, and he's been featured in over 300 media articles. I'm highly honored to speak to someone like Jenk today, having gone to school with him for 4 years. I feel very privileged and excited to get into his journey. So Jenk, I want to get started by asking you how this all started and how you went about starting iCoolKit, your first business.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. What an intro. I feel stacked to be I'm loving it. Thank you so much. So kind of taking it back to the beginning, I used to, before we were still together, I used to go to a day school, and you'd have this kind of everyday Monday morning malarkey where the teacher would say what everyone do on the weekend. And all of my friends would generally say something along the lines of, well, kind of nothing really, or I went to the footy, which was normally the most exciting of the answers. Whereas I was kind of able to kind of do not necessarily like cooler things, but generally just like different things, which I kind of had heard about through kind of being an only child. I'd hear about through my mum's friends, or generally older people would kind of tell me about kind of cool stuff. I kind of do it on the weekend. So anyways, then I'd come back to school on the Monday mornings after having been to, whether it's like a graffiti tunnel convention or been to kind of this kind of show or kind of something else like that, like some of cool niche things, I'd always come, and then this would kind of become a pattern, and people would start coming up to me saying on Friday afternoon, saying, what are you doing this weekend? Because we want to come and join you, because whatever you're doing kind of last week sounds quite cool, and the week before that was quite cool. So what are you doing this weekend? And then from that, their parents sort of kind of asked my mum at like school pickup, saying like, what are you doing over the weekend? How do you find these cool things? And then that kind of grew into this weird, almost like group chat-esque email thread where it would basically be my mum saying, Jenk, what are you doing over the weekend? And then she'd send it to like my friend's parents. And then we kind of quickly realized this is quite a cool idea, and there's not really a place for kids to find cool but equally quite niche things to do. So that was kind of how iCoolKit was born, and we effectively built this website with the sole purpose of just cool stuff to do in London. Like, it was very basic and very, very primitive as well as a website itself. And then we started to get loads and loads of traction. So our first bit of monetization was just from the ads, and that was kind of how that sustained itself. And then from that, as I've started to grow a bit older, around 2019, we were thinking of making a change and shifting what was iCoolKit to something a bit more mature, a bit more purposeful, because that was kind of always the back of our head. And then COVID hit, and I kind of had a very deep realization that they're very deep. I think everyone kind of had this realization, but I kind of had this understanding that like the world is absolutely in bits. It's like kind of shattered, especially like prime, like COVID, July 2020 for that summer. So that was kind of when we were like, you know what, we really need to make a big change here. And that was kind of when THRED really kicked off, because we were the content on iCoolKit was kind of maturing with me, but the website itself was very immature. It was still very kid-like looking. So we effectively had this kind of deep, meaningful content in the chassis of a very childlike website. So that was why we initially wanted to change. And then as COVID came about, I realized that the world's in this state, and I really want to at least help to make a difference, because at this point I had a couple of thousand followers and however many people on the website. And I said, I'm fortunate enough to have a position where I have traffic to a website and I have more followers than a lot of my friends did. And I said, you know what, I want to use this, because it's like starting a 100-meter race 10, 20 meters forward. Like it's quite a big difference when you're all trying to make a difference. I was fortunate enough to really be able to have a head start in making a difference. So that's how THRED came about. And then let me try to think of the timeline. Then as I started to grow and pick up a lot of kind of traction, a lot of people would come to me, specifically brands would come to me, brands who were very successful with the older generations, but less successful with young people. And they'd say like, look, clearly you understand social change. You understand. I've just realized I kind of forgot to explain what THRED is, but I'll explain properly in a second. So brands have started to come to me and say like, help us reach GenZ. And then that's kind of how THRED Media came about. And that's kind of how I got into consulting. But, to explain actually properly what THRED is. So following on from this kind of realization I had in COVID, and I really wanted to make a difference, I thought that I don't think that any one person is going to change the world. And especially not during COVID. But I thought that if you really wanted to make a difference, the way to do that would be by encouraging people to make their local areas better. And if you can create local change on a global scale, you can create global change. So that was the initial idea behind THRED. Sorry, I forgot to kind of say that. But that was the initial idea behind THRED, was that we wanted to inspire, educate, and hopefully impact the most amount of people and encourage them to take action in their local area. And hopefully that would have a kind of domino effect. And then the consulting kind of came after that. Sorry, I got.
Thank you. Thanks for your explanation there. I was initially just wanting to ask about iCoolKit, but you've explained your entire journey in such great detail. But there's a lot of things to unpack, in there. And I think for me, having read about and learned about your journey, I can be like, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But for someone that doesn't listen, that doesn't know you or hasn't listened to your content yet, they would probably want to learn a bit more about the steps that it took to get where you are today. The first thing that I want to sort of play devil's advocate on is you were only around 12 years old, or if I get that right, I mean, you started at iCoolKit. You know, until about 5 minutes ago, I had the presumption that your parents were making you go to these really, you know, weird or, you know, cool or quirky things to do on the weekend. So what would you say to people that say, you know, your parents made you go to these things, your parents, you know, built this website, your parents did this and just used you as the cover for it?
I mean, it's not like, I've had that a couple of times before, and it used to look a lot more like that. But then as I've kind of matured and as I started doing a lot more of like the speaking engagements that I do and stuff like that, I think people have kind of realized that's far less so the case. But in all actuality, the only like level of truth to that is I have had massively supportive mum, and she kind of helped me like through a lot of it, to be fair. So, I mean, credit where credit is due. I absolutely
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Like I didn't do this whatsoever on my own, and I kind of haven't really ever claimed to, but, it's kind of through the support of parents, but it's never been a situation where I've kind of dragged them along for the ride or they've dragged me along for the ride. It's very much been like a kind of side by side situation. And kind of, yeah. And also growing up as an only child, what I found was that actually those things, I just thought that was kind of natural, that you kind of just do cool random stuff with your parents, like on the weekends. Like that was the, like, just what I was doing.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question on what made you want to do all these cool and quirky things on the weekend. But I think the idea that you were an only child perhaps led to that. Do you think you thought different as a child? Or anything along those lines?
I don't think it was necessarily I thought particularly differently, but just because of, I mean, whether you think it's nature or nurture, we don't really know, but just because I grew up around so many kind of older people, I think that I just thought that was normal. And the things that they were talking about, I thought were things that everyone would talk about. And like the things that they were going to, I thought they were things that everyone would go to. And that was why there was this kind of difference when I went to school, being like, well, actually, you're not doing anything that everyone else do on the weekends. So that was kind of...
As you mentioned, with getting revenue for the site, that must have been very exciting. But I think the step from when you just have a business that generates revenue, to actually starting to get your first employee is a pretty impressive step. So when you were such a young human being, how did you attract your initial employees at the start and also get them to take you seriously?
So initially, I'd spoken about this a lot because as you kind of earlier mentioned, I play a lot of instruments, and my first employee was actually my guitar teacher. And I asked him like part-time, can you write articles like for us? Because he was super like culturally aware. he was kind of super knowledgeable and kind of he was one of the people who had a lot of these cool things around that he wanted to kind of introduce me to. So he was the one actually who started writing. He kind of did it part-time. And then I was like, you know what? I fully believe in this. And it was quite, looking back, when you look at the kind of the trajectory that we had, it looks like quite an easy investment to make. So then I kind of said, let's like fully invest into this. And I said kind of pretty please. And my parents were very kind of fortunate enough to be able to say, you know what, let's actually give this a go. And we had one person, and then one person became 3, and then 5. And then we had a kind of point where we kind of, as the kind of the cost of the employees were coming out, we can then all within our trajectory with our monetization came out. But it's worth mentioning now that our kind of monetization strategy is completely different now. We don't monetize on the website whatsoever anymore. But that's a whole thread thing we could talk about later.
Yeah, well, 100%. We'll definitely get onto that. But still on the sort of iCoolKit journey, I mean, people listening and, you know, the conversation we're having right now, you're, 18, 19 years old, I'm 19, nearly 20. You know, you hear about these Mark Zuckerberg types where they're, you know, young, a place like Harvard, they go to the best schools, the best universities, and they're deemed as young, and they drop out and they build these amazing businesses. But you were doing this a whole, pretty much half a generation earlier. You know, you're a 12, 13-year-old doing something that pretty much no one has ever done before. And what was that like in a school environment? Did you feel imposter syndrome?
Well, it was actually almost the opposite. I wasn't really aware of what kind of it meant. Like, for as far as I was aware, I had like some really cool people who were helping me out with an idea that I had. And I was able to kind of pay for them through the idea. So that was kind of how that came about. And then, so I never really felt like I was, at no point was I feel like a kind of a boss to anyone. I just feel like I was able to obtain the help of people who also believed it was a good idea.
Sure. I've listened to your answer in previous podcasts and, you know, media outlets on whether you think that entrepreneurs are born and made. And if I quote you correctly, you say that, you know, no one's born an entrepreneur. You just kind of have an idea, and putting it into action is what makes you an entrepreneur. But still on that point, you know, I think, you know, you have a lot of people in social media these days who are just talking about how I did this and how I did this and how I did this. But the fact of the matter is, if everyone bought like someone's course and completed their course and had an idea and built it, not everyone's still going to be successful. So do you think there still is some magic dust, or, you know, a level of IQ or a level of discipline that entrepreneurs have that makes them succeed? Or do you think it's random, or do you think it might be due to something else?
I think there's a couple elements to it, and I still believe that they're not born, but I think that, I don't believe that they're born one way or made like they're one way. It's definitely a spectrum. I think it's a combination of quite a few different things. Luck, absolutely 100%. I'm unequivocally very lucky at quite a few turns. Even recently, like I kind of, quite recently kind of just luck, things that just turned out to be really lucky have massively helped us. So luck is definitely a factor. And anyone who says it isn't is lying, by the way.
You make your own luck, Dank.
Well, I don't know. And I hope so. And then I think just personal skills, like personability and just conversational engagement, and the ability to be like authentic and genuine, because entrepreneurship boils down to execution in general. People have fantastic ideas all the time. And the issue is, just to get a step back, I talk about spotlights, like this idea of lost Einsteins, where it's very easy to spot a athlete or an intellectual or a musician because they show signs very early, and everyone's very quick to give their music lessons a coach or a teacher. It's very hard to spot someone with really good ideas. So that's the first point, is that no one is helping these people with the really good ideas and nursing them and encouraging them to grow and execute. So really the entrepreneurs of the world aren't the people with the best ideas. They're the people with the ability to execute on those ideas. So, and then within the execution is where I think the skills come in. So the ability to kind of, that's what I'm looking for, kind of persuade in a less of a kind of persuade, maybe not the right word, but the ability to give an idea and kind of instill an idea into someone else, and you get them onto the same level that you're on and encourage them to help you in your execution is really kind of one of the skills that you need. So I think it's a level of personal skill, but I don't think that entrepreneurship is just, you're almost born with an entrepreneurship bone. If that makes sense.
Sure. I find that point very intriguing about, being authentic and inspiring people and bringing them on your journey. Something I would note, though, is that, with a musician, they're young, they get trained, they become a musician. You can see the output directly. You can see grade 8 pianists, whatever. An athlete, they're young, they're faster than everyone else, they're stronger than everyone else. They get to a level, oh, wow, they're an Olympian. That's, an intellect, they're surpassing everyone on tests and exams. Where with entrepreneurship, from my point of view, a lot of things that make you successful are time, expertise, and resources. 3 things that a younger demographic don't always have. Sure, you can have time in your school holidays, but you're still with your parents and you don't really have the freedom. In terms of expertise, you've got very little life experience comparatively to people 40 years older than you. And then in terms of resources, you'd be unlikely to have worked a job or at least made enough money in order to succeed. So why do you think THRED focuses on targeting that younger demographic in terms of purely entrepreneurship, when instead that it's more the average, entrepreneur is now 60 years old?
So I want to kind of not disagree, but I think I have an answer to each of those different points. I think the time thing in general, because a lot of people have said, well, I don't have enough time. I think the real answer is you don't have enough time of which you're willing to give up. But there's definitely enough time. Like most people go to school for 6, maybe 6.5 months of the year, which gives you another kind of 5.5, 5-ish months of the year to really kind of actually commit to an idea. And if you want to commit to it, then you do have enough time. It's just not enough time that people are willing to give up because they'd rather do nothing on the summer holidays and then kind of go away for Christmas for a couple of days and then do nothing when they come back. So that's generally my rebuttal to that. Is you do have enough time, and this comes back to the execution point. It's just you don't want to spend that time executing. So that's kind of the answer to that. Resource-wise, what was the second one you said? It was time, expertise. So expertise, I found that generally no one is more willing to help you than someone with a lot of expertise when you're super young and super lacking in expertise and knowledge whatsoever. So I found that actually now I find that I get far less advice and people are far less quick to help me along my journey than I was maybe even 2-3 years ago when I was still when I was 16, 17, they were I'd bump into people or I'd go to these conferences and I'd have like a little guest pass and I'd say like, please, I'd love to have your copy of advice. And people would be very willing to stand there for hours just to kind of give like this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 16-year-old a bit of advice. Whereas if you're going in at 25, 30, 35, 40, like you said, the average like entrepreneurs like 60. At 60, you're asking advice from other entrepreneurs your own age at that point. And I found that, at least in my experience, they've been far less willing and the advice has been far less kind of genuine and it's been a little bit more kind of brushing away in that sense. So I think on the expertise front, I think it's actually easier than anyone realizes to get advice at that age than it is when you're older. And then on the resources front, I think that there's a couple kind of aspects to this. I think on a school level, this is something that I've kind of spoken to a lot of schools actually about on a couple like school boards, is having like entrepreneurship clubs and having these places where these people can ideate and actually get the resources they need and get the advice that they don't realize that they need as well. And kind of just have somewhere to just think and ideate and kind of write on a post-it note an idea and then kind of put another post-it note next to it. And then you kind of build out this kind of storyboard of your idea. Somewhere to do that is what you need. And I think that schools are a fantastic place to do that. And that's a kind of a lack of resource which schools can provide. Equally.
Yeah, I think.
I was just going to say as well, sorry, that places like let me think of some examples. LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Masterclass, Coursera, even YouTube. Like you can learn, the education has become so democratized if you have the internet and connectivity nowadays that it's all of a sudden put a massive playing field on the resources available. Because before the best business advice and the best financial advice and the best entrepreneurship advice was only accessible to those who went to the best universities, because that was where the professors were. Whereas now, a Harvard or a Stanford professor will kind of do his day job and then go home and then set up a little vlog, and then for like £2, you can listen to him speak his entire course that he's just given to Harvard students, and you can listen to it on like Coursera or Udemy or like these democratization of education platforms, or like Skillshare, Masterclass, stuff like that. It's become so easy to access knowledge that actually I found that these resources that used to be unavailable are available. And the same thing has happened with technology, with cloud computing and whatnot.
Honestly, I think that's one of the best answers to that question that I've ever heard, to be honest. I think you broke that down fantastically. And with all three of those strands, they're not just, oh, do X, Y, Z, achieve $10,000 a month, right? That's just bullshit. I think the fact that you've broken that down and put that in a really applicable way that anyone can take away from that is really impressive. On the point in terms of expertise, I couldn't agree more. And adding to that point about what I was saying with, a young person learning to play piano, they get older, they improve. An athlete, they're young, they improve. I think a lot of that tutoring and that teaching is coming from older people who have moved past their time. An older athlete coaches a younger athlete, an older musician past their prime coaches, teaches the musicians. Where entrepreneurship is one of these unique industries, as you have pointed out, in that you could be an entrepreneur at any age. And so I wonder if the reason why people are less inclined to give you advice when you're older is because they're worried that you might beat them at their own game. Is there anything that you would respond to that?
I mean, I understand the logic that you have, like that. It does make sense as a kind of logical steps. But I found that I've been able to get lots of advice from kind of all types of people. I've just found that generally the closer you are in age to someone, the less advice they're willing to give. Whereas, so for example, I spoke to Steve Bartlett, and he's a kind of fantastic entrepreneur, highly, highly successful. And he was kind of super forthcoming with information, but he was also quite ill. So, but equally, he's far younger than other entrepreneurs who've also been forthcoming with information. So obviously it depends on the person, but I understand the logic you're arguing with, but I haven't personally experienced that much.
With meeting people like Stephen Bartlett, he's someone I look up to a lot with this podcast, but there are lots of people that you've interviewed in lots of different fields, from marketing to podcasting to running the biggest tech companies in the world. Everyone sees these online images of these people in which they're perfectly curated and they can decide everything they release. Are these people that you have met as great as they are online, or have you noticed that they're slightly different when you meet them in person?
I think when I met them, they were, but you have to keep in mind that over the last couple of years, the way we consume online and the way that people are presented online has massively changed. And I'm thinking more about the couple examples you gave. So let's think Rory Sutherland, Werner Vogels, and Steve Bartlett, for example. Actually, Werner Vogels is a bad example because I don't think many people would know him by name. But Steve Bartlett and Rory Sutherland, they have both done a fantastic job of having years and years of content, especially Rory. He's been doing that. He's been doing his gig for eons. So Rory's done a really good job of taking the content he had of him speaking at different places and then clipping, short forming, and basically TikTokizing all of his content. So the way that he's presented now is not by other people filming him. The way he's presented now on the online is how he wants to come across. So when I originally met Rory, all of the stuff I'd consumed about him was old speeches of him that other people have filmed, which he was in control of being posting. It was just him doing a speech at whatever kind of Google event or whatnot. And that was kind of how my portrayal of him. And that was highly, highly accurate. And likewise with Stephen, I would kind of full form watch a lot of his podcasts and listen to them. And I knew kind of about a bunch of the work that he'd done beforehand as well. So that kind of example of him as well was very in line with what he was like when I met him. But all due respect, I think he's a fantastic person to meet and gave me really good advice. If I only went through both of their TikToks now, I think I would have a very different impression of them when I met them in person, because the way that we consume and understand and appreciate people has become vastly different and vastly short-formized pardon the fact that's not a word. And that kind of has a huge impact on your impression. Yeah, it should be. But that has a huge impact on how you meet them, if that makes sense.
Do you think that's having a negative impact on our society? I mean, you gave a TED talk on the idea of collectivism. Have I got that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In which, if I'm quoting you correctly, you're basically saying that people say, you know, we only look at a post for like 6 seconds, and they think that means that we've got short attention spans. Whereas what you were saying is that we just have a quicker ability to basically decide what we like and what we don't like. Mm-hmm. However, on that front, if we're creating an ecosystem and we're creating a world in which teenagers are spending over an hour on short form content a day, you know, there's an increasing rise of social media and a decline of TV. And we're seeing these people that feel like friends but aren't, who, as you've just stated, are creating an unrealistic, you know, portrayal of themselves. Do you think that's an unhealthy way of being, or do you think it's fun?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have such a poor mental health epidemic in our age right now. It's like diabolically bad. Like that. And I think that's the reason, is because we're thinking that we can replace genuine human interaction with short form interaction. And this kind of happened during COVID when no one could see each other. But now, most parts of the world, we all can see each other quite easily. And admittedly, okay, I'm going for the negative first, but I'm going to come back to the positive in a sec. The negative is we've replaced human interaction with facade, non-deep interaction, like very kind of blank, straightforward, lol, send a TikTok to them, like their post, and give them a FaceTime every now and again. It's kind of how you interact with most of your friends. If you're fortunate enough to live next to them or be able to travel, then maybe, okay, if I live near you, I'll see you whenever, like maybe once or twice a month, maximum. And if you live in a different country, I might see you once a year if you're like a really close friend of mine. Whereas most of the friends you make, you actually never really see. And I'm finding this, especially now that I've graduated and I'm on my gap year, all my school friends, and I'm sure you'd have had the same, I'm like kind of still in contact with, but in reality, I know that I'm really never going to see them again, or never going to try to kind of try to make plans with them. If I see them, it's because I bump into them. So that's kind of the negative situation is, just to kind of recap, we've replaced human interaction with this non-real engagement, nothing kind of deep or meaningful or emotional kind of interactions. However, the positives are a couple. A, you can stay in contact and with a lot more people for a lot longer, because you used to never really actually be able to speak to someone or ask them anything until you saw them in person or sent them a letter back in way long time ago. Whereas now I can FaceTime people. I can FaceTime my cousins who live in New Jersey, who I hardly used to be able to see like once every couple of years. I can now FaceTime them whenever I want, which is fantastic and amazing. And that upholds a relationship. And for many people, that improves their mental health. But equally, the same forces are the things that brought our mental health down in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a really good presentation of that. If I'm remembering this correctly, and I just looked it up, it might be the wrong name. I'm not sure if you watched a Netflix documentary named The Social Dilemma, which was released in 2020.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was basically, you know, the gist that I got from that. For those that haven't seen it, it was basically a load of executives and people involved in social media that had a very dramatic Netflix documentary, as you might imagine, in them basically catastrophizing a lot of social media and like, where did they go wrong? And then everyone's like, oh, I have no idea where it went wrong. But then social media just continues as it is. So then I've got a question for you, Jenk, and this is a moral dilemma that's been going in my mind for years, and I don't have a following perhaps whatsoever. Is it better to make content with this negative social media thing that's making people addictive, that's taking people away from their friends, that's shortening people's attention spans, that's making people addicted to a need for dopamine? Or is it better not to make content at all? The answer I have got to that is I think it's better to make long form content in which, you know, not impacting the attention span. And also I think it's better to put out good content, educational content like this, than it is just putting out thirst traps. But I'd love to hear your point of view on that situation.
Well, I think there's space for both of it, to be honest. And I think that's kind of been proven by the fact that both still exist. It's a very easy kind of thing to say, like, should I do this or should I not do this? Because if it exists, someone's probably tried it and it worked. So the answer is probably yes to some. So to answer your question, like, I think there's space for everything. And I think that you should make the content that you are better than anyone else at making. If you're better than anyone else at podcasting and you think you can bring something to podcasting no one else can, which by the way, I think you do and you can, then do that.
Thanks.
I mean, you did, economics. Oh God, I'm really going to embarrass myself now. It's like, comparative advantage. That's exactly what it is.
There it is.
Comparative advantage. Where if you're, Riley would be very happy with me. If you are better than anyone else doing something, if you're better at making thirst traps than anyone, make all the thirst traps in the world because you're better than doing it than anyone else. Likewise, you're better at podcasting, you're making long form content, short form content, any content. I just think do what you do best and equally what makes you happiest, because then I kind of really, not to get kind of babbly about it, but I think that kind of spreads. And I think if you're happy doing something, then people are happy consuming that content. So
I think that's a great point of view. And I would agree with your point of view, but sort of playing on the contrary side of that, the main primary objective of a lot of businesses is to make profit, right? And so you have gambling companies, smoking companies, drug companies, in which their only primary objective is to make money. Even if pharmaceutical companies, even if their patients die, even if gambling companies, their customers get addicted. And I could say the same about social media networks and large scale influencers who, for them, they're happy. They're making a lot of money. They're getting a lot of views. They're doing stuff they enjoy. But is that worth the tens of thousands, tens of millions of people that it's impacting in a negative manner?
Yeah, that's negative externalities right there. But,
there it is.
Yeah. Okay. I do completely agree. And you're right. That is the negative side, is that generally falsehoods. Sorry. I think that just anything false you should really never be posting in general. I think that the three kind of core tenets of good content, at least that I try my best to go by, and I'm sure we can find examples where I've not stuck to this, but authenticity, originality, and transparency are the three things that really make good content. And within that, I think you can make whatever content you want. If you want to be authentically original and transparent and make a thirst trap, be my guest. But equally, if you're going to pretend to be more knowledgeable about something than you are, or you want to fake something, say you fake like something that someone would buy it through a link of yours, that's really where the issues within social media start to come about. And I think it takes someone highly, highly knowledgeable to even clock 50% of the fake shit that happens on Instagram, and kind of people who aren't knowledgeable are just taking it all in. I mean, the amount of people who, just because they have PT or doctor in their Instagram handle, are just spewing garbage about fitness or about nutrition is like absurd. And it actually, I think it takes the credible sources and it makes them look less credible, and it makes the not credible sources look more credible. So you're doing a disservice to both sides there. So I think that authenticity, originality, and transparency are the three pillars of good content. And within that, make whatever you want.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Something in the statement I made in which you have to create longer stuff to make people less addicted. There's a huge contradictory, thing within that, because if you make better content, more people will watch it, but it has a bigger negative externality on the people watching it, and by negative externality, I mean bigger impact on the people that are watching it, could get more addicted and then more hooked. But on the other side, if you make your content worse, you increase people's attention spans because they're less hooked, but then people will just go and watch other content. But that's enough on that. I'm sure I could talk about the negatives and the positives of social media for hours. I want to transition back to THRED. So we've talked about what I called it. We've talked a bit about the positives and negatives of social media. We've talked about your interviews, but I want to go back to the transition to THRED. So just to reiterate, you were this 12-year-old kid, you build up this business, you generate revenue through online articles, and in 2017, you built this business called THRED.
Yeah.
Could you remind everyone why you did it, why you started it, and why in particular you thought that demographic was so important?
Yeah. So there's four main changes we went through. We refocused, renamed, rebuilt, and reshaped. So from iCool to THRED, iCool now doesn't exist because it's become kind of THRED, and we renamed it obviously to THRED. So THRED, the thread without the 8 for anyone curious.
Cool.
We refocused the demographic. So instead of being 8 to 15-year-olds, we're now 16 to 28, but we have younger and older, far older viewers as well. So, but that's generally the vibe. Then we reshaped the content. So it was all 100% social change focused, and it still is to this day. And then finally, we rebuilt the website. So it looks completely different, looks much more mature, looks much more sophisticated, much more social change based, much more educational.
On the idea of social change, when I think I first saw you, no offense, when I first saw you go into some form of, environmental meet, I kind of thought it was a joke or some form of publicity stunt. But after seeing your commitment to it, I'm very impressed, and, I truly believe you, if that means anything. But on that, I think we're in a culture these days, and I've noticed this, I live in Jersey, I went to school in the UK, I'm working in London now, and I've go to university in the States, so I've got a pretty global view. But cancel culture, the idea in which if you say something, you're not going to be able to work anymore, your career's going to be over, everything in your life is going to be cancelled. But then you take that and you develop a site purely dedicated to social change in which people say controversial things. Did you ever feel a threat of getting cancelled or people going against you? Or did you just think it was a necessary means in which to achieve your goals of social change?
I think a point I want to make about cancel culture, and whether I tell myself this as a kind of way to feel better about it or not, I think that cancel culture in general is the 5% end of the spectrum getting really mad at the other 5% end of the spectrum. And they do it loud enough to the point where people think that it's a 50% versus 50%, which is really not the case. Because I think that social change is very much a spectrum. And if you want to call it kind of social change spectrum, or you want to call it kind of liberalness or whatever, then you can call it whatever. But I think that cancel culture in general is not something that I feel like I was going to be super affected by, because I kind of knew that I was doing it for my own personal I knew that what I was doing it for was genuine. And once you're doing something you're doing genuinely, I find that if you're doing it publicly or not, you still gain as much satisfaction. So cancel culture, all it really does is that it takes away your public image. If someone doesn't want to talk to me on the street because something you say, that doesn't change how I feel about myself. I still want to do kind of what I'm doing, whether I'm cancelled or not. And I think that's kind of the difference. And if I was, that's a thing, really. Apologies. If I was to kind of be cancelled, at the end of the day, that all it does is take away your public image. And if your whole brand is your public image, then you're kind of up shit's creek. I completely understand that a lot of people rely fully on that. But at the end of the day, if my public image goes, I still come back to the desk every day. I'm still at THRED. I still believe in what THRED is doing. And there's still a team of kind of 12 people here who are also believe in the journey and also believe in what we're doing and could keep pushing it on forward, whether I'm public or not. So there's a kind of bit about cancel culture there, but I think that I was never super nervous or worried about that happening to me, because I feel like I am in a position where if it did happen, it's something that wouldn't matter, because it obviously would, but it's also, I'm just in a position where I'm not solely reliant on my public image, because I have kind of, I'll get deep, but what's inside.
Yeah, I think that's a really great response to a tough question. And I think for what I've heard of listening to the podcast and the online long form media, is a lot of influencers have had a negative impact due to comments or things people saying that stuff about them. But the fact of the matter is that no matter what anyone says about you, and this isn't just for influencers, but for anyone, if anyone says anything mean about you, if anyone does something bad to you, you've just got to focus on who you are, stick to that and move forward no matter what. I want to go on to something that I hope does not get me cancelled. I don't want to say the wrong word. Maybe I'll cut it out. I'm kidding. But you've spoken about this idea that to achieve activism and to achieve an impact, you need to create a global reach so everyone knows about it. And then you create localized solutions to these problems. So you have the environment, the environment, for example. You say you look up to people like Greta Thunberg, if I'm saying that correct. She talks about the environment. She, tells the whole world about it. You say that it's not her that's going to create the impact. It's the people in the countries around the world that are going to make the impact. And so I have a question on that. Looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, in which George Floyd was horrifically killed, you'd have a movement starting in the United States, riots, burning down police stations, smashing in stores. It receives worldwide coverage, and Black Lives Matter as a movement grows worldwide. A lot of people are extremely angry. A lot of people want change in universities, in companies. However, from my perspective, it's sort of fizzled out over time, a year or two later, because there were so many people that had this idea of what Black Lives Matter was, which all were different in their minds. For some people, it was about black people being more equal, more equitable in society. For other people, it was about, we need to hire only black people. For others, it's white people, white privilege. There were lots of different ideas of what Black Lives Matter meant. So with this idea of developing localized solutions to this problem, how do you develop localized solutions to worldwide problems whilst maintaining a core message of what you want to see so that it doesn't fizzle out over time?
Okay, firstly, very well put, very well done. Thank you. I think what you've pointed out, so I'm going to kind of go big and then kind of narrow to that example. What you've pointed out is one of the biggest issues within what I call collectivism, so online activism. And it's this idea that it fizzles out afterwards. So if you imagine, I'm going to really embarrass my lack of history knowledge here. However many years ago for example, suffragette movement was, that took, I want to say, around 10 to 11 years of door knocking and protests and raising awareness. And it took a really, really long time to get enough people to make a big difference. 10 years. And after that, because it took so long, there was enough time to build a really well-oiled set of demands is the wrong word because it's not a hostage, but it's a really well-oiled machine which enacts the change that you were fighting for in the first place. So that was why had the success that it did. The issue now is that a well-placed tweet can make the same amount of difference, if not far, far more now, than 10 years of protesting could however many years ago. And the issue with the well-placed tweet is that there's no well-oiled machine to back up once everyone has the awareness that well-placed tweet is going to give them. So you can highlight an issue now. You can highlight the issue of Saudi women fighting like their lives to drive cars to Saudi Arabia using the internet. And then everyone hears about it. But then all of a sudden, because it goes so viral, there's then not a well-oiled machine afterwards to enact the change you're fighting for. Likewise, with so many different examples of things that you kind of see, there'll be days where you kind of, one person will post a story, 4 people will see it, they'll repost it, then 10 people see it, repost it, and all of a sudden, everyone has the same Instagram story up for a day. And then it kind of fizzles out. And then a week later, you have the same thing for a completely different issue. You have the same thing for a completely different issue. So what you've kind of highlighted is this idea that things do fizzle out, and it's one of the biggest issues surrounding collectivism. And not having a well-oiled machine is so I keep saying well-oiled machine. I mean, like a well-oiled website and a productive means of enacting the change that you fought for in the first place. And not having that is one of the big issues. Now, because to go back to your example, and you were talking about how different people interpreted the different issues, I think that it massively changes per example, but the best thing that did was the amount of awareness it did on a global level, because BLM brought BLM to countries and towns and cities and villages that hadn't even considered as a concept to them. So what BLM really did was actually it enacted so much change that whether it was the change that people were looking for, like whether it was about kind of hiring black people, or whether it was about police brutality, or whether it was about just BLM in general, the awareness, I think, is what was really, really impressive about that. And I think to credit to the BLM movement is actually that, I think, has stuck massively. And that brought awareness to people that didn't have awareness beforehand. And it re-brought to the front of your mind a lot of awareness to people who already had it. And to go another step further, I think that we're kind of fortunate enough to live in the UK and US, both massively developed nations, where everyone's aware of BLM, but maybe there was things that were subconscious that had been re-brought to the surface, which I think is a very, very good thing in itself. And then there are also kind of countries which hadn't even really considered a lot of the issues of police brutality and whatnot, and then they were able to be taught. So positives and negatives, but I think overall BLM was a positive, started by something very negative, but a positive.
I now want to transition to Thread Media. I mean, again, I doubted you, Jenk, for perhaps the third time this podcast. You know, the idea of hearing a teenager becoming a consultant to not just the S&P 500 companies, but the most valuable companies in the world, worth hundreds of billions, almost trillions in valuations, sounds ludicrous from face value. I mean, you know, we've gone to one of the best schools in the world, Eton College, producing, you know, nearly 20 prime ministers. University-wise, I'm at one of the best, and you're likely to go to one of the best. And many people there, their top job is to become a consultant. You know, they all get fed down, investment banker, consultant. So at point blank, Jenk, and please don't take this the wrong way, what makes you, pre-university, pre all these genius kids, the consultant, as not just one of, but the only consultant for these enormous brands like Google and Snapchat? What makes you qualified?
So I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I'm going to kind of give an example and help you get there the way I got there.
Perfect.
You go to Eton, you go to Duke, graduate with whatever, I don't really know how the US kind of, I don't know how Duke works specifically. You graduate the best you can.
Whatever 100%, that is.
100%. Precisely. You graduate the best you can. You're how old after a 4-year degree? Say you took a gap year. 22?
23.
Maybe 23. Yeah. Maybe you want to take another year. 24. Let's say 23 for your sake, we'll say 23.
Okay.
You then do a year of finding yourself. You do internships, work experience, because you couldn't get enough when you were at school. You're now 24, 25. You then go to Deloitte, Ogilvy, Accenture. These either marketing, kind of management consulting, or kind of production consulting companies. And then you get put onto the team for Coke. Coke and their relative drinks. So whatever that is, Fanta, Sprite, stuff like that. And they say, we need help. And they say, great, I'm here. I'm here to help you as a young, sprightly child out of university. And they say, we want to make a drink for 16-year-olds. All of a sudden, you're no more knowledgeable about 16-year-olds because you weren't 16 for the last 9 years. I hope you're not very knowledgeable 16-year-olds than the 50-year-olds are. Actually, I would argue the 50-year-olds are maybe more knowledgeable because they might have a 16-year-old kid. Sure. So that's where Jenk comes in, is Thread doesn't work with Instagram, Coke, Dunkin' Donuts, Snapchat, Microsoft, Google directly. Thread works with companies like Ogilvy and companies like Accenture, who are these giga marketing, consulting, management companies, which are hired and kept on retainer by companies like Coke and Instagram. And, well, I say Coke, Instagram, I mean Meta, but you know what I mean. And they're kept on retainer by them. And then when Coke comes to Ogilvy and says, we need help selling a drink to younger people because no one's buying Coke anymore, they then say, well, fuck, we don't hire anyone before the age of 23 because we have a year-long internship program and we won't hire anyone before they're at university. So then they come to Thread and say, help us. And I hope that was a more fun and better way of describing why Thread.
Sure, I don't think Google, Snapchat, or Ogilvy will be dropping you off that answer, so I think you did a good enough answer, at least for that. I myself consider, myself as someone that comes up with a lot of ideas, I have a lot of business ideas and things that I want to do. But, putting myself at the higher end of the spectrum, I would say that's an unreasonable example to put other people against. But I still say that the average person has a lot of ideas, and they'd say, oh, Coca-Cola, what if they did this? Snapchat, what if they did this? But, as you have previously stated, a lot of people have ideas, and it's about putting those ideas into action that makes them an entrepreneur. And you have developed an incredible skill of having these ideas, having amazing ideas, but then actually making them a reality with iCoolKit, with THRED, with THRED Media. And I also read through one of your it was an incredible report on GenZ with Ogilvy when you released that in the new year. I read through the whole report. It looked incredibly professional. Yeah, it looked incredibly professional. It provided me with amazing insights and actual things that wasn't like, oh, that's some random pulse stat. It was like, oh my God, like that's really fascinating.
I'm glad that you liked it.
Thank you. I'd love if you could take me on your journey. You know, you've got an idea for building THRED, the website. You've got an idea for building this consultancy project for Snapchat or Google. How have you go from the idea to implementation? What are the steps?
I'm glad that you asked this because this is where the luck thing comes in. And I quite like telling this story. So THRED evolved from iCoolKit. So THRED, there was a point in time where THRED was only THRED and there was no THRED media attached to it. And that had a relative amount of success. And that was when people didn't start kind of coming to us for consulting because we weren't a consulting company. But what they did was they scrolled down, they said about us, they saw the founder, and they said, shit, he's 19. He clearly knows kind of what he's talking about. I'm going to email him, or I'm going to go up to him after a speech, or I'm going to contact him somehow and ask him for just a little bit of advice. And that kept happening. So then I thought, well, let's launch THRED Media. And then we did a little bit of consulting like that behind the scenes before the official launch of THRED Media. Then I posted on LinkedIn a article from THRED, the website, just like a social change article. And then a guy called, actually I'm not going to say his name, this one Brian. A guy called Brian uses the photo, like copy and paste the photo from our thing, and then posts it saying, oh, by the way, like, he doesn't tag THRED, doesn't tag me or whatsoever. He just copied and pasted the photos that I used, unknowing that it was a photo that we had created, so we had like the imaging license for it, right? So we got kind of like pinged for the copyright. And then I was like, I emailed him, like, hey, just so you know, love what you said on your post. Just so you know, this picture's taken from our website. No worries whatsoever, but would love like a mention to the article, if that's okay. He said like, sure. And then he clearly is like, who are you? So he goes on to what I do and he sees kind of THRED Media consulting, because we kind of just about put consulting in my LinkedIn at that point. And then lo and behold, he works at Ogilvy. And then he says, I have 2 cool ideas if you'd be willing to like have a chat. I was like, yeah, sure. And he gave us 2 small pitches that Ogilvy had been pitched. And he said, if you can help us with these, we'll talk about it. Talk about building on a relationship. So that we got given the pitch for enterprise, you know, the rent-a-car.
Sure.
So it's like probably the biggest car rental service, at least in the UK. It's enterprise cars. And we were given the pitch for them and we helped them build that out. We actually did all of them different mobility. So we spoke about why people don't rent cars anymore and why enterprises, well, at the time was a little bit screwed. And we kind of did the whole pitch for them and we sent it back to him and he said, shit, man, this is actually quite good. Gave us another one. Actually, I think the next one was Dunkin' Donuts. And then we gave it back and he was like, shit, you guys are quick as well. Well, because we're a team of 7, it's 7 in the consulting. It's not exactly like it's a hard turnaround. You just shout across the room to say like, hey, can you help me with this? So we were quick and we made quite good stuff because we were all young consultants and an enterprise was asking about why no one was renting cars at 18. And we were all 18 to 25. So that was kind of the luck and that was the creation of how that happened.
I just want to ask a quick follow-up, and then I got my final 3 questions. Just quickly on that, you don't have to name specifics if you don't want to, but I'm incredibly curious about how you price your services as a consultant.
How I priced them was, so this is what I did. People can tell me if this is a good idea or a bad idea, so I'm not going to say this is good advice or not. But a lot of the first things I do with each company, I actually massively underprice. I'll charge like, I don't need to put a number to it. I massively underprice.
Purposely?
Yeah, purposely. Because I want to show that I'm quick and I'm good and I can get it back to you quickly. And I can just show that we're legit. Because we're a team of 7, you can kind of underprice the first thing you do because it's not like I'm asking like 4 different people with different teams to do different things. Sure. Then the next time they come back, we'll say, okay, here's the situation. And when you come back to us, then it's done on a per person per hour and per level. So if you want me to do something, the amount of hours it takes me in the day, or a per day rate is how much kind of is then if you want one of our managers to do it, or if you want our kind of year one intern to do it, then that's 3 different per day, per person, per level, if that makes sense. And they each have individual numbers, but as you can imagine, the manager is more than the executives are more than the kind of new people and then whatnot. So per time, per person is how you price it.
Okay, I've got 3 last questions. I hope we can all fit them all in time.
No worries.
The first of the 3 is a pretty selfish question. And I seemingly, when I listen to Chris Williamson's podcast, his main ambition for doing the podcast is he says, this is what Chris says, I just interview people that I'm interested in talking to, and I couldn't care if I had an audience listening. It's just that I get to ask these incredible people questions
I think I've heard that, yeah.
That I can implement in my own life. So, my version of this, my one question, all of these questions were for my selflessness, for all my listeners, but this question that I have for myself, and which can also be applied to my listeners. So I had Personable. It's a podcast focused on speaking to the world's best in their given field, enabling you to become the best you can be. All right, so I have my quote and my reason, why I could be better is I'm young, I'm curious, I'm determined. I want to get into the positions that my guests are in. What you very clearly spoke about with the idea of social change is that in order to have a successful movement, you need a clear message, you need a clear website, and you need a clear brand. Using Personable as an example, how can I build a clear brand with a website across Instagram, across TikTok, across YouTube Shorts, across long form, and how I build that back to my central core message to, as you said, entrepreneurship. A successful entrepreneur is able to bring people along the journey with them.
Yeah.
So using that and using your thoughts, how can I put a brand together using your insights?
I think, the first thing is, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a website. I think in the example of social change, it needs to be some kind of tangible outcome that allows you to kind of continue what you were originally social changing for. First point. I think that, hard question to be fair. I think that
you say your podcast is finished. There's no way.
Yeah. No, I think that you already do a very good job of keeping your message true to the core. And to really kind of harp on like a Simon Sinek point here is as long as your why, how, and what are specifically in that order of importance, I think that you'll be fine. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people who do something like you do this are their what is normally most important to them. Like, what am I doing? I'm making a podcast. That's really not how you should be thinking about it. And I think that and then the how do I do it is, well, I just record and I press play. Why am I doing it? To make money. Money is ever why. Money's a result. So that's the kind of the first point. So once you kind of flip that order and you actually say, why am I doing this? Well, I want to find out interesting things from people. I want to learn from them, and I want to be able to provide a platform for people who wouldn't normally be able to hear from these kind of people to kind of disseminate their knowledge through me. Then, okay, that's a great why. Or there you go, 3 whys there. And then how you can do that? Okay, well, I'm going to invite XYZ every T for time. And you're going to say, okay, and then I'm going to ask them meaningful questions, which I think are going to be appreciated both by myself to improve me as a person, to kind of go Chris Williamson on you. And then are also going to improve my audience's people. And maybe they can gain a 10th of the enjoyment that I gain out of asking the questions. And then the what is, well, I'm going to set up a podcast, send them a link, and then you can film it. So I think once you have that order, then you're kind of cooking with gas.
Quick sub question. Go for it. A little tangent on that. You mentioned before that the 3 keys to success in this realm is authenticity, originality, and transparency. 3 things that I feel like I embody with this podcast. However, I haven't cracked how to hack the TikTok algorithm, the Instagram Reels, the YouTube Shorts. Do you think that just by me, personifying those 3 traits over time, getting good guests, producing good episodes, that it will naturally grow? Or do you think that I also need to gamify social media to get that success?
I don't think you need to gamify it necessarily, but I think that as long as your roots are not brought up by your by what you do on social media, as long as you keep your social media with the intent that you got it in the first place with, then I think, can I go for it? There's no reason to hurt it. I think the issue is, so for example, I'm very aware that my social media as a entrepreneur and as a speaker, and this is, by the way, most of my LinkedIn, I know that I'm not doing that to make money off LinkedIn. I'm not doing that to become a LinkedIn influencer, a linkfluencer,
Sure.
if you will. I'm doing that because I know that that's going to drive traffic to my consultancy. And I know that, so I'm using my social media as a means to an end, not the end itself. So and by the way, there's nothing wrong with using your social media as the ends. If you want to monetize your social media, then go for it. And that's a fantastic idea. And if you can do it, do it. But as long as you stay true to the reason why you're doing your social media, then I think your branding and everything will kind of just keep itself alive and everything will stay in line. The issue is when you then start posting for the sake of posting, as opposed to the sake of driving people from your social medias elsewhere. Does that make sense? Maybe I've explained that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Two final questions.
Sure.
The multiple one is, what's next for Derek?
Next for Jenk is, well, go mini golfing, which is very exciting. Go mini golfing tonight.
Amazing.
And so I'm on the first of my 2 gap years, and I'm going to apply to a bunch of unis, I think, this year. And not necessarily to go to uni, because I'm very open to either option, but I'd rather have the option to be able to go. So hopefully apply this year and then go, or at least have the option to go at the end of kind of September 2025. And then from there, I'm not too really sure, at least personally, THRED wise, keep growing with THRED. And we're kind of now on our kind of, hopefully we've got a lot of things happening in the works. So, things are doing kind of well. So I want to kind of watch this trajectory and hopefully kind of watch it go up.
This is the podcast that's going to drive. This is the means.
This could be it. This could be the
meme. This is takeoff. All my millions of subscribers are gonna flock.
They're all going straight to THRED for some consulting advice.
Straight to THRED. All right. My final question. This is a question I ask to every single guest. And the question is as follows. Please, could you tell me one thing that you want a listener to take away from this podcast? It could either be something that you have said or something that you haven't said.
I think I'm going to give a young entrepreneurship piece of advice here, because I think that's a field in which I want to say quite qualified, I hope. And I can't remember who said this, so this is not an original thought. Someone did say this, but I want to disseminate this info anyways. If you treat your idea like a company today, you'll have a company tomorrow. Whereas if you keep treating your idea like a dream today, it will stay a dream tomorrow. And I think that really well describes the mindset shift, which is the first thing before you execute. And we spoke about executing at the beginning, and I want to speak about the end. It's just categorically the most important part about this is your execution and actually doing it. And the way, I think the first step to doing that is by treating your idea like a company.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Jenk. I feel like I have learned a lot. I
hope so.
Before every podcast, I was explaining to this 3-part plus. I write out a load of topics of things that I would like to cover with each guest. I write out their journey. I do research into their background. I watch every interview I can find and read books if they have them. And I'd say that we covered a lot of the career-based stuff, but there are still about 1 million topics I could have covered. And I think that shows the breadth of your experience and how much you've done at a really young age. And I think you will get negative feedback from people no matter what you do, because anyone that's more successful than someone else, the person that's not as successful, upset, come on, they've cheated. How did they get that? But actually, by learning your story and unpicking how you got to each step, I think it's really impressive what you've done. And I'm excited to see what you do next, Jenk.
Well, I hope so. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Harvey. You're a fantastic host. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
And all the best.